Welcome to the Breakfast Leadership Show, where we interview global thought leaders on business, leadership, and life. Here's your host, keynote speaker, best-selling author, and chief burnout officer of the Breakfast Leadership Network, Michael Levitt.
Welcome back. I've got Dr. Travis Parry on the line. What's up, Travis? How are you?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks, Michael, for having me.
Great to have you here. It's always good. And we talked about this a little bit in the pre-show about finding somebody that is in the similar field that we're both in. And you talk a lot about work-life balance. You've got a book that I want to dive right into. But real quickly, share your background and why you do the work you do.
Thanks, Michael. Yeah, I think this is such a great question. My father was about a month away from his 50th birthday, and I was a financial advisor. I was running my own practice 2 states away, and I got a crazy phone call. Actually, it was about 6 phone calls on a random Tuesday or Wednesday. I can't exactly remember the date, but in reality, I was just coming home from work and it was bombarded. And I thought, gee, can't everybody wait? Like this is kind of crazy. I answered the phone call, finally talked to my wife. It's just like, your dad just had a massive heart attack on his bike ride, and he's being flown to the hospital. And I thought, oh, he's going to be fine. Everything's going to be just fine. But he died that day. He was a fit guy. He rode hundreds of miles a week. He, what I thought, lived a pretty healthy lifestyle. And it all kind of came crashing down on me. And I asked, why, how? And being 26 at the time as a financial advisor, my father and his life insurance policy was my first death claim. So I had to help my mother pick up the pieces financially, emotionally, physically, and move her life. And it was just such a huge undertaking for me that I knew that I needed to look into this, not only for me, right? But once I started to explore what really killed my dad, which I think is stress and a bunch of other factors, but stress is the main one. I really wanted to explore that, learn about it, and then get back to business owners, financial advisors, others who are way overworked, who are headed the same direction, and help sound the warning signal, raise the flag of trying to find balance. So this year, I decided to write the book, Achieving Balance, and people can find that at travisparry.com/book. So that's Parry with an A /book. And I pre-launched that already and hit #1 internationally during COVID, nonetheless, because I think work-life balance has been turned on its head. So as I've been sounding the alarm, it's all of a sudden just exploded.
And congratulations on the book. And I completely agree with you. It's definitely been turned on its head. And as someone that had his own cardiac event 11 years ago, I know what that's like, and lost my dad earlier this year. And I think had to relocate mom up with my brother and, move out of a house that my parents lived in for 26 years. And during the pandemic, it was, late March when just things were started that we had to do the move. And that was an interesting trip, to say the least. But just the whole everything changing and navigating through all of the nuances of closing accounts and opening up new ones and all of these things that a lot of people don't think about come into play. And I think my dad, I know my dad, I think stress and wear and tear got him too. He was, obviously considerably older than your dad was when he passed, but still, I honestly feel it was premature for dad to leave. And it definitely, stress, I think, was a huge component of it as well. And so I'm thankful that you wrote the book. And I know when we talked about in the pre-show, there's 3 myths that you highlight in this book, and I want to dive into those. So what are these myths that a lot of people have in mind, and what can we do to debunk those?
Thanks, Michael. Yeah. So as I was exploring work-life balance, work-life balance is really a 1980s term, right? And everybody has a different definition of what balance really is. So I did a bunch of research on stress and did a master's degree in psychology to understand the mental health and how that connects with your physical health, right? Your brain and how you utilize that incredible organ to be able to have optimal physical health. But I found that as I was exploring stress, that it really kept coming back to relational stress. It kept coming back to family of origin stress, or your current family marital relationships and finances and how those all mix together. As a financial advisor, I thought I was leaving the field to go pursue this career, and it honestly just brought me back. And so now I train a lot of advisors and help them understand these three myths. And so to answer your question, the myth that I found that most people, number one, is just the myth of balance, that it's doing everything at the same time. Again, everybody has a different definition of what balance is. But I think what we can all agree on is that if you try to do everything, even, with good intention, that's not balance. That's crazy. It's not going to work. It's trying to multitask or switch tasks between everything. And the psychologists have told us that it's not productive. It's not great quality. And over time, you're just going to stress yourself out thinking you can do everything. So the real antidote to that myth is really priorities. What are your priorities? Now, let's focus your time in those priorities. And that can work for business. If you're a business owner and you run something really successfully, well, do the things you really want to do, the things that are really important to you, and delegate everything else. Get out of the way of your own success, business-wise. But personally, it's kind of that same thing too, Michael. Like, we care so much about our health, but how many hours are we actually exercising, sleeping, eating well, meditating, like all the things we know we should be doing, but just aren't?
Yeah, and it's one of those things where we oftentimes, when it's people I talk with, they say, well, I don't have enough time. And if they have an iPhone, I'll ask them, okay, how, especially with the latest operating system, there's a time tracking and how much time you spend on your phone. And it's usually in the hours for most people. I said, do you think you could carve out 20 minutes of that 6.5 hours you spent on your iBinky and maybe do some light exercises or walk around the block, or maybe 20 minutes to do some meal prep instead of ordering the food delivery, which is so high in everything you don't want to eat, and maybe, put down the phone for half an hour and meditate or relax or just stare at a wall, whatever the case may be. All these things are achievable and can make your life better. And the thing about getting your life in a more harmonious state is days and weeks and months and years can flow a little bit differently, but getting in tune with how your life flows can make things so much easier and reduce the stress level. And, even at the time of this recording, I just saw an article from Inc. magazine shortly before we got on that said 59% of Americans are identifying that today, which is election day in the United States, as potentially the most stressful day they've ever had in their lives. And when this episode airs, hopefully we'll know the results of the election, and we're not going to dive into any of that today. But it's one of those things where if you have a life that has these built-in and scheduled, making your life better for you and the things that you want to do with self-care and taking care of yourself and eating well and being active and all of that, you won't be in that 59% because you can navigate through challenging periods of time because you know how to look for them. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, most of the systems that out there that work is because you set it, you forget it, they're automatic. And, maybe you need to course correct once in a while, too much, and you're definitely a control freak, you're right. But I deal a lot with business owners, financial advisors who can't give up some of that control, and they can't allow delegation to happen as a natural process. or who think that, yeah, if I have a schedule, I'm too rigid. And so my basic philosophy in time management is put the big rocks, and I'm not talking Steve Covey rocks. I'm talking about those things that just need to happen. Be like a firm rock and be in place. Keep those appointments you need to keep, but be flexible when necessary. If you're too flexible, you're out of balance. If you're too rigid, you're out of balance, and you will feel it. And so most people describe balance to me as more of a feeling of how they recognize where they're at. And a lot of that comes in their stress levels. A lot of it comes in their physical health. Now, stress really does affect our health. It affects how we deal with things. And right now, the biggest stressor in a lot of people, especially in America's minds, is the national election. But most of that is totally out of our control, right? We go do our small part, we cast a vote or not, and that's how we deal with it. So most people, if they can learn to prevent the stress, cope with the stress, recognize where these stressors are coming from, and if it's something that they can be a part of trying to help towards their goal and their direction, great. If not, most people just need to learn how to let it go, how to live life less stressful. Too many people are staring at their phones and at the news screens right now all day and all night. And quite honestly, that's not going to change the outcome. I've thought about, for the first time, just not turning on anything tonight after work. Maybe I'll just wake up tomorrow morning and see what happened. But this is a mindset of kind of dealing with these stressors. And like you mentioned, we'll know when this episode airs what happens. But I think that could be said for anything in life, Michael. Like, these big stressors a lot of times are distress. There's a difference between eustress and distress. Distress is the bad things, the potential, what could happen. But what about that wedding? What about the birth of a baby, or anything that can happen at work that's good? Like, that can be just as stressful. If our body doesn't know how to handle that stress, we may turn to addictions to help just basically feed that and numb us, right? And that could be any sort of addiction or vice that just allows us to get out of that and not have to deal with the anxiety and the stress of what's coming. So in all actuality, it kind of just depends on what that stress is, where it's coming from, how we cope with it, which brings me to myth number 2. And that myth is essentially, I used to call this the myth of productivity, or the productivity myth. And that is essentially that, okay, let's be productive. Let's be prioritized with our time. Let's be really productive. And that will solve it. And a lot of people, I think in the business world, think that way, that if I can just be productive, and I'll be, I'll do it all right, and I'll still be able to get it done because I'll be smarter than everybody else. The reality is, productivity without boundaries is the problem. If you don't have boundaries set up, then you won't be able to handle that stress. And even if you're productive, most end up being a more productive workaholic.
Going back to something you said a few minutes ago about delegating and doing better. I mean, they kind of go on hand in hand, delegation, and I can do it better than anybody else. I was horrible at delegation, and it, led me to have my cardiac event, my year of worst case scenarios, the ultimate burnout, everything. And it's because I wasn't good at delegating. Well, when I went through and reinvented myself, which I needed to do. Most people don't. Most people just have to make some adjustments here and there. For me, I definitely need to reinvent things. When I did that, one of the areas I focused on was, okay, delegation. How do I do it? Understand why it's important to do it. Recognize that there are people in this world that do things better than I can do. And sometimes that's an ego thing. And that can be, especially for a leader, like they don't want to admit that. And they don't necessarily have to, but they can say, look, hire the right people to do things that are better than you, and that's going to be better. And that's going to allow you to focus on the things that only you can do. And prioritization of when you do things and scheduling things is so crucial. My calendar is as important to me as oxygen. And I say that tongue in cheek, but it's pretty close because it allows me to be able to accomplish a lot of things, but also making sure that I take care of myself as well. And I've shared on my show many times that I color code my calendar, and my self-care and quote unquote me time is colored with my favorite color. And the reason why I do that is we naturally see our favorite color faster, at least in my opinion, than other colors. So if I don't see enough of my favorite color in my calendar for the week, there's a problem. And I need to course correct and make some adjustments. Now, if I see a week where there's a lot of my favorite color, I'm going to check with myself. I'm going to say, okay, how am I feeling? Do I feel energized? Do I feel drained? Do I feel lazy? And that's one thing that I think a lot of people don't spend enough time on is checking in with themselves and seeing how they're feeling. What are some things that you're enjoying in life? What are things you don't like? This, election, we keep going back to, I'm not stressed about the U.S. presidential election. I'm not stressed about it at all. I'm not going to watch the news tonight. I'll get up tomorrow morning and see what happens. I'm more concerned about who wins the Register of Deeds. I'm just joking. I don't really care about that, but it was on my ballot, the Register of Deeds. So I got my fingers crossed. My world is going to be shaken if that other person wins besides this one. I don't even remember who I voted for for the Register of Deeds, but I did vote for somebody. I do know that. But end of the day, it's just, productivity is, if you have deep work and you focus and you schedule things and you're just working on that, not doing the multitasking stuff that we all fail at, you're going to accomplish more by doing less. And I learned that the hard way. But once I learned that lesson, boy, has it made a ton of difference in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And productivity is key. It's just not the magic pill. And I think that's what I want to get across is that we need to be productive. And I love that you have those tips and tactics to have your favorite color that helps keep you balanced. And that's a really good tactic. I actually ask my clients to color code all of the different areas of their life and then color code even the things they do at work so they know where they are and how they compare that against their ideal calendar. I do a lot of that work with my clients, but so I 100% agree, Michael. It's just, I had a client who he was killing it in the mortgage world, and he literally had like 2,000% increase in sales month to month. And he was growing so fast. He was working 75, 80 hours a week. He had 5 kids at home. And, he said he loved them, wanted to be with them, but, 75 hours a week, how much time do you really have to spend with your family, with those people that are going to grow up and leave your home? Time is ticking away. And so as we talked about this, he looked at me, and as we got through some of the trainings, like, Travis, I love this productivity stuff. This is really, really going to be phenomenal, but I'm now tempted to work longer. Right. And so it's that whole it goes back to those priorities of, yes, maybe so. Maybe you could be a really productive workaholic. And I think a lot of people are. So how do you create those boundaries? Well, part of those boundaries is finding an accountability person, having somebody that can help you. And a lot of times this accountability person tends to be, a professional coach, right? This is where I insert travisparry.com and say, hire me. Well, kind of, maybe. This is where I say, actually, there's a third myth. And that third myth is that we believe in America, if we can just help ourselves, if we can do it ourselves. In fact, we have a whole industry. It's called personal development. And that's like a $14 billion industry. The reality is that we don't do anything alone. No man is an island, right? You and I are on a podcast together. Could you do this on yourself? Yeah, you could chat. You could bring guests on. That we're here to help explain more knowledge to your audience. But if you've ever had a coach, and I know you coach and I coach, it is a relational experience. And so to help somebody who's had workaholism as a huge problem, and they do experience burnout like you've talked about, and they kind of hit that wall, they know that the best thing to keep them from going back to that place of being a workaholic is actually somebody that cares about them the most, someone that loves them more than anyone else. And it's not the coach, it's the spouse. So what I do most of the time, my secret sauce, Michael, is actually coaching spouses and, the coachee, the couple together on how to keep each other accountable without killing each other. So that person doesn't end up like the mortgage client who said, hey, Travis, I think I'm just going to keep working 80 hours. No. You ratchet it in. You have somebody that can keep you accountable. But then that person also helps you to be healthy, to have good relationships, and to manage your finances well so that you enjoy living life outside of work more than you do your own work. And that should be fulfilling. Work, I'm totally fine with work being your calling professionally. I don't have a problem with that. But what about the other 100 hours outside, Mr. Workaholic, of what you're doing? Because there's only 168 hours in a week.
Yeah, and I love that you do that, because if more people did that, then, a good colleague of mine who is a divorce attorney has had the busiest year of her career, and she's been at it for a long time. This pandemic has launched a lot of divorces because people just weren't working well together, and they got time together a lot more than they normally did, and it really highlighted some challenges. But the fact that you coach on that to help each other be accountable, number one, makes that relationship stronger, but also too, it keeps things in perspective. And I love the analogy that your colleague had mentioned that, okay, now I've learned all these productivity tips. That means I can do 100 hours worth of work in 40. That means I got 60 more hours. Think of what I'm going to do. And especially in the mortgage industry, because I know in talking with other people, that is an industry at this moment has been going absolutely bonkers. The workloads are insane. I know in that industry, they're really having a difficult time because people are buying and moving like we haven't seen in a very long time, which is great for the industry, but there's only so many hours in a day and you can't work all of them. It's not good for your health. It can kill you. It nearly killed me, and I don't want. And the stress, unfortunately, took your dad early, and mine as well. And it could happen to you. You think, oh, that won't happen to me. 50. Okay.
50, 49. Yeah. He was a month away.
Yeah, and I know that many millennials are having heart attacks before age 40.
Unreal.
It's stress, and stress is something you do not flirt with. You don't dance with that person at the club. Don't dance with stress. It's not something you want to do. That's for sure. So, Travis, I've loved this conversation. Where can people find out more about you in this book and everything else you're doing?
Yeah, TravisParry.com with an A. And then, the book is right there at the book tab, TravisParry.com/book. I speak. I consult with companies, helps change the culture to be more balanced, focused, but real balance, right? And my book is on pre-order right now. That's going to be changing probably by the time this podcast goes live. So if you can, go pick it up quickly, TravisParry.com/book. There's a bunch of really cool bonuses there too, Michael. I mean, you can pick it up on Amazon, but if you go to that website, I actually have a whole masterclass. I go into depth on the myths and how to debunk them with more steps, about 5 steps that they can do to become and achieve balance. I also have a training on the place that probably kills our productivity and raises our stress levels the most, our email. That's the number one place that I hear from all of my clients. And I've got a 10-minute video training on how to declutter and master your email inbox. And then I also have an article that they can download of the several ways that they can enjoy getting outside of work and how that actually can help them inside of work to take more vacations. So definitely go to the website so they can download all of those freebies and pick up the book. It's going fast.
That's awesome. I'll definitely have that in the show notes. So Travis, love this conversation. Thank you so much for the work you do, and appreciate everything you're doing.
Thanks, Michael. Appreciate having me on the show.
Thanks for listening to the Breakfast Leadership Show, part of the Breakfast Leadership Network. Visit breakfastleadership.com for tips on empowering your business and your life.